Karen is clerking this afternoon. Thank you, Karen, and I'll ask that you call the roll, please.
You're welcome. Fries,
Here.
Thomas, Sanchez,
Here.
Kenyon,
Here.
Hanson,
Hanson here.
Surges.
All right,
Okay.
first item of business, we do have a quorum, is approval of the minutes of our November 19 and November 24 meetings. Mr. Fraz moves that we approve them. Mr. Kenyon seconds. Any corrections or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fries,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
approved.
All right, the minutes are approved. Public comment, I don't have anyone signed up to speak today, but anyone in the audience that would like to address the committee certainly is welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Vern Tepe. Hopefully soon, next week, I'll be sitting up there. But I came to address a couple of points with the funding that you have. One of the things that the state did associated with trying to help people that are in need is providing some assistance associated with rent relief. And they were quickly overwhelmed with requests associated with that and were unable to really provide the kind of rent relief coverage that people needed. And I think with the way things are going now, people on an individual basis really need that kind of assistance. And if you have any funds left over, and if there's a way to help with that, I'd like to really suggest that that be seriously considered, because there are a lot of people in this county that are really in trouble. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tepe. Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? Mayor Burns?
As a representative of not just the city of Geneva, but also Metro West Council of Government, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. John Hoscheit. I was listening to CNN on the way over, and I understand this is your last meeting. And I wanted to extend to you our deepest thanks and appreciation for your hard work, your leadership, your steadfastness, and of course, your friendship. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Burns. It's been a pleasure. All right, any other public comment? All right, hearing none, we'll go into our agenda. First item is, again, our just periodic report on status of funds. Ms. Brady is here to discuss that from the Treasurer's Office.
Chairman, as right now, the balance in the fund is $54.4 million. On the first round of checks from the state's attorney, I still have outstanding the village of East Dundee and the village of Maple Park. They have not been by to pick up their checks.
All right. Are we attempting to contact them? I know we have communication consistently with them and security protocol, and we work through that with City of Batavia. Thank you for everyone that was involved in that. So if you run into a problem with that, will you follow up with the state's attorney's office, Carolyn, if they don't come by within the next few days?
Emailed her on Monday to let her know at that time there's 3 checks still outstanding.
All right.
So I'm
Thank you
trying to
very
keep the communication. I just got the list from the state's attorney that she just put in process the next round of 8 checks for $6 million.
Okay.
So we'll be doing that as soon as we get it.
Very good. All right, any questions of the Treasurer's Office? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, update on application process and time frame. With respect to the programs that we've completed, the bulk of our programs are completed. There are 3 programs that are still open for application. Those were the 3 latest programs that we had approved, and I just want to have Mr. Berger provide a update in terms of the progress of those. The first is the phase 2 of the business grant program. That opened up, maybe 10 days ago or so. And it's been robust in terms of applications. But Mr. Berger, do you want to address the committee about the success of that process and where we stand?
Yes, I'd be happy to. You are correct. We launched that program, I believe it was a week ago last Thursday. You met that day in a committee meeting, and we launched that program literally while you met. The application is open right now through the Zoom grant portal. And as of 11 a.m. this morning, Josh Beck has reported to me that we have 216 applications that have been submitted. The total amount requested is just over $4.8 million so far. We have received many phone calls and emails from the applicant pool, 179 to be exact, and we've returned all of those and connected with all the eligible applicants and guided them and advised them along the way. So far, we are in the midst of our review of the applications, reviewing them simply for completeness. We've completed that review process for 32 of the applications. Only one of them so far has been perfect in terms of its completeness. Our expectation is that we will batch the first set of complete applications will be batched and sent to the consultant KEB by the end of this week. And assuming that the expenses are all deemed eligible and the consultant signs off on those items, we expect that we'll be issuing awards and funding agreements to those businesses at the earliest late next week, early the following week. I also want to report to you that since the application portal is still open, we do see that many businesses have initiated an application. I mentioned to you at your meeting last week that we can't see the detail of their application, but we can see that they exist and that they are perhaps visiting the website repeatedly to add to their application, hopefully, and get that completed and potentially submitted to us. So we have many applications underway. No real sense of how many of those will actually be completed. Some may never be completed, may never be submitted. That's up to the applicants to make that call. We have followed up with every applicant, which each applicant includes an email address in their submittal to us. And so we have followed up with all the applicants to let them know what the status is and to advise the applicants that are in process of the staff assistance that's available to them if they need it. We have had one business actually visit our office earlier today, and staff assisted that business with scanning their materials and getting it uploaded to the portal. So we are doing everything we can to assist the applicant pool through the process. Then the other two programs that you requested our office to deliver involve grants to the performance and visual arts venues, and then also to the historical societies and history museums in the county. We are combining those two applications into one portal, referring to it as our cultural institution grant program. Our expectation is that will be launched late tomorrow or early Monday at the latest.
All right, with respect to the, going back to the business grant program, just to put some numbers in perspective, we had allocated $5 million to that program to start with. We've got $4.8 million applied for. It's anticipated that as the applications are vetted, that some of the $4.8 million in applications may not qualify or may not be completely fundable depending on what's asked for. And that's just normal in a process like this. But one of the issues we'll be discussing later in the meeting is the remaining unallocated funds and what we do with those. And the fact that there are other applications in the portal that may exceed the amount of money previously allocated is something that this board or the future board has the ability to address with a funding modification if it deems appropriate. All right, so with respect to the status of those programs, that's where we stand there. The other status of the other programs so far is, we heard from Mrs. Brady, the municipal applications have all been vetted and funded, and we're just waiting for a couple of municipalities to come in and pick up their checks. It's my understanding that the other units of local government have funding agreements that are either back or in the process of coming back, and we expect funding for those units of government within the next week or so. And the staff will be working with those units to contact them in the same manner in which the cities and villages were contacted. As far as the not-for-profit grants and the business grants in phase one, on the full board agenda this next week are two resolutions, one that approves the actual concept of the funding agreement that would have to be signed as a condition precedent for the funds to be issued to the recipient, and also authorization for the state's attorney's office to execute those agreements once they come in and all the appropriate documentation is obtained. The thought process being then, once that's approved, those will move through the process for funding and distribution within the following week or so as that process carries out. The other program that remains open is phase one of our business program. That program continues to move forward. I know that I had discussions with Fabiola and Michelle Neerman about the status of that program. You may recall that the detail in the applications in that program was more intense than Mr. Berger's program in phase two. But nonetheless, we have a number of applications that are pending being processed. That's been put on priority in terms of getting those processed. And again, the expectation is within the next week or so, there'll be feedback on a report to the committee about recommendation for funding there and for a report in terms of any remaining funds that may be available. So that's the status of all the programs to date. Regarding the balance of the funds that we have, we can talk about that now. And I know, well, with respect to the not-for-profit applications, we've already vetted those and approved those. It's just a function of getting an agreement to them that's approved by the board and having those signed off with proper documentation. So where that leaves us with is a couple of questions that are outstanding right now. And I know an issue that Mr. Surgis has been like a pit bull on in terms of dealing with.
A very happy pit bull, a very smiley, friendly.
Depends on your perspective. But in any event, one of the issues that's come up is with respect to the grant program that we have for funding for in this latest round, the three programs. And the issue is, just to summarize where we were historically, we have a business grant program that is for-profit businesses that has a maximum grant of $25,000. Then separate from that, we have, and that was funded with $5 million. We have a separate program for history centers that has, I believe, a grant limitation of $25,000. And my recollection is that we funded that with $250,000. That's going to be launched tomorrow or Monday, as Mr. Berger has indicated. And there's been advance notices provided to those entities, and the application process for that group should be very streamlined just because the number of entities is limited. Then the third component is the grant, or the fund that we set aside for $1 million for performing arts centers. And that had a maximum grant of $100,000 per entity. That was limited to visual or performing arts, and that was the criteria that the board had established. It's been suggested, I believe, by Mr. Surgis, without putting words in his mouth, that we consider expanding that to include what I would consider amusement parks or entities of that type. The particular park, although I never like to discuss this in relation to a specific business, but it's been disclosed and discussed and even mentioned in our meeting yesterday, that Santa's Village is one entity that exists in the county that would fall in that category. And the question is a matter of policy. Does this board or committee want to recommend before we launch the program to expand that third grant group to include entities such as amusement parks? If we did that, that would we would have to certainly direct Mr. Berger to do that, but the consequence of that would be as follows. Right now, entities that are amusement parks have the ability to apply under our $25,000 business grant program. If we were to shift them into this other program, it would increase the amount of grant that would be available to them. When we set up the amount of funding for that program, I think it was the intent of the board to cover what we anticipated the performing arts centers in the county to be in terms of numbers. And that was, we didn't expect it to be more than 10 or so. And the comments were the Hemmons, the Paramount Theater, the Arcada, entities like that would be the I guess the classic type of entity that would be covered under that program. If we expand it to amusement facilities, the number of applicants in that category would likely increase significantly. And that would include entities not just like Santa's Village, but perhaps Funway. I know in St. Charles, there was recently opened a indoor, in an old grocery store, an indoor amusement park that would deal with indoor entertainment. And so that's the issue before the board as it relates to that request. So Mr. Surgis, do you want to embellish on that or follow up?
I guess when I look at, as I mentioned last time, it was never my intention when I gave support to the performing arts allocation that it would not include an entertainment venue such as Santa's Village, that I thought that would embody that. That's my error, my mistake. Santa's Village is when you talk about the Hemmons, when you talk about the Paramount, you're looking at iconic heritage, history within the community. Santa's Village goes back as far as I can remember as a child. It sits on, it's not a building, it sits on acreage. They have done everything they can to remain relevant and reinvent themselves, only to be shut down unbelievably hard by the pandemic. I believe that if we don't reach out, they may not exist. And for those reasons and the historic relevance and the sheer volume of residents from our area and the people they attract from outside of our area, they bring in more people than most. So I would like them included. I have always said in most of my conversations that if I had to come up with a category, that there were just two facilities that came to my mind, as limited as that is, and that was always Funway at the south end and Santa's Village is at the north end. I as far back as I can remember, and I'm 57 years old, I remember when it was just a go-kart track down in Batavia, and then I remember going on dates in high school and roller skating equally as much as I remember going to Santa's Village. So
that was back in the day where your date was taller than you?
Absolutely. So, yeah, there's I don't know that I can discriminate between those two legitimately, but I think that in defense, I can look at those two as their own category within our geo area and try and support both of them. Santa's Village just happens to be, within my district, within my northern sphere up there, that I would like to go to bat for them and them specifically.
Mr. Frost?
Yeah, I originally pushed for this category, and acknowledging that it was highly unique, as you mentioned, I think you could count the places I had in mind on one hand, and even if we add this, you can still count them on one hand probably. So I have no idea I have no objection if we were to expand the category. Maybe we could. I agree with you. We don't want every strip mall, arcade to fall under this category. So I'm thinking that we limit them by the description, and that may involve something as far as stating indoor and outdoor activities.
Acreage, land
Acreage,
size,
yeah, exactly. I'm thinking 2 acres or more, but something along that line, just to limit it substantially to these iconic iconic businesses that have been there. Again, both of those have been there 60 years, I bet.
How does
So,
Sycamore Speedway fit in?
It's in Sycamore.
Is that our county? I don't know.
It's in Kane County, I believe.
I don't think so. Is it?
Just the tavern. Oh, yeah, that is.
Yeah,
It's
is
in
it?
Kane County, and depending on your choice of entertainment, or amusement, you may go out there
John,
for
candidly, didn't know it was in Kane. Don't know that I considered it.
the free passes as board members.
Bob Joe Speedway is what I remember, but that's,
It is Bob Joe. Well, the same deal.
Well, you would have places like Kuipers and Windy Acres and Gobert's up north. They're entertainment,
Mhm.
agricultural, which is of course the best.
Mr. Sanchez, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we're looking at defining these as amusement parks, I think that helps limit the scope a little bit. Amusement park, well, I guess we would have to find what the actual definition is, but my understanding, you have things like rides. I can't think of many entities in the county that have rides. And that's the majority of what Sanders Village is. There's some indoor areas, but the majority of it is all outdoors. And like Cliff said, this is really a kind of a cultural, institutional thing around here. And to see it was lying dormant for a few years, and these people have started to revive it and haven't even been able to open the entire thing. And to see it close down yet again, that would be a pretty sad loss. And not just in terms of the cultural icon of it, but jobs. It's a lot of people's first job is at Sanders Village in this area. And I don't know how many people they employ, but it's a lot. So I would imagine that there's some way we could define this where it limits the scope to something large like this. And I'm really curious to know if anyone knows how many entities like this actually exist in the county, because I'm guessing it's a small number. We're not talking trampoline parks. We're talking places with, a Ferris wheel, things like that.
Well, I mean, we just talked about 2 entities, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate only because once we create the program, we put the burden on staff to be the referee, and we want to make sure we're as clear as possible. I don't know if Funway has rides per se. I know they have go-karts, which aren't technically, well, whatever, and batting cages and roller skating capabilities and whatever else is there. And I know that's changed over the years, so I'm probably dating myself. But Mr. Berger, if we were to entertain a motion to add to the definition of the entities under the grant program that was for performing arts venues, would the term amusement park be precise enough for you that you'd feel that you could administer that without major problems?
I don't think it would be quite adequate, to be honest with you. As I'm listening to your conversation, the county fairgrounds came to mind as an event venue that is largely entertainment in nature. You've already discussed a number of other venues that provide entertainment. And you are correct. Once you ask us to deliver something, we are confronted with the challenge of defining things. I will tell you that with performing and visual arts venues, we've given considerable thought to your request in those 2 categories. And, an initial review of the landscape, revealed very quickly that our performing arts venues consist of properties that are owned by for-profit businesses, quasi-governmental agencies. In the case of the Aurora Exposition Center, I'm sorry, I'm losing track of the name. There's a specific authority created, the Civic Center Authority, I believe, in Aurora owns and manages 3 event venues, in fact, the Paramount, the Copley, and the River's Edge Park outdoor auditorium or amphitheater. In the city of Elgin, you have a city-owned facility. The Hemmons is owned completely by the city of Elgin and run by the city of Elgin. There is no independent operator. In the case of the St. Charles Arcata, you have an owner, a for-profit owner, and a for-profit operator. So as we've crafted the guidelines for this program, we've tried to be very even-handed in how we set the rules. And so, for example, we're making the program available to entities that own and or operate, and we're respecting the $100,000 cap per facility. So should there be a separate owner and operator of a particular facility, we're going to ask that if they both apply, that they're coupled together and they must stay below that $100,000 cap. So,
I think that's important to point out. What we're debating here is the amendment to increase the available funding for an entity of that type from the $25,000 that they would currently qualify for to up to $100,000. So it's really a $75,000 incremental qualification that it would include.
I will tell you also that, we did reach out to Santa's Village. I spoke with their manager on Tuesday and made them aware of the $25,000 grant. They were aware of the first round. I clarified that the rules are not as stringent for the second round. The scale of the business is no longer an issue. Employee roster is no longer an issue. So we did make them aware of that. And Josh informed me that we have not yet seen an application in our portal from that business.
And Jason, I spoke with Jason, I'm sorry, Scott, I spoke with Jason directly after you, encouraging them that with the discussions were at the $100,000 level and, hold off until we know exactly what it is, what we're looking for, that we would have time, even if it failed at the $100,000 level, to still turn in for the round two $25,000 level, was my words.
All right. And I'm not sure that that's the program, and the program's filling up consecutively here. So it's a first come, first served.
I may have
basis
erred. I'm just
program. Yeah.
being honest about what I said.
All right. All right. So what's the will of the committee on this issue? I think the action that we would take would be to amend the current program, or recommend that the current program be amended to be more inclusive, to include entities of the type that has been discussed here. And so that's really up to the will of the committee. Mr. Kenyon?
I would entertain that motion.
Okay, so what are you going to recommend?
I recommend that we expand it to people like Santa's Village, and I was even thinking the Cougars. Just look at them, they've been shut down all year, that park. And that's a terrific entertainment facility. So it has to be like $100,000 to make it worth their time, up to.
No comment.
We're still
At the
in
end of it, or-
discussion.
I don't know. I don't want to.
I would agree. I would like to see it opened up, and we just have to, we always seem to put the burden on Scott, but I think we have to be a little careful how we word it. But, again, we were talking about three entities originally, and then we were up to 5. And so I think if you throw in everybody, you're probably looking at a dozen. So, I think we should open it up. And of course, the size of the venue would also determine the size of the grant. So a smaller venue that just barely makes it into the category wouldn't necessarily receive the 100,000.
All right. Well, then
Well,
you're,
let me- if I could-
so you're
if I could-
redefining the program then.
Well, I guess that was a question I had. Is it up to 100,000 or is it 100,000?
It's a maximum of 100,000 in reimbursable expenses, presumably, just like the other programs, as applications are submitted, if they have 100,000 in reimbursable expenses, they would qualify and be
So
entitled.
like the original batch, that we talked about, we'll probably easily make that 100,000 request, and then a smaller venue, maybe not so much. But I think we should, the money's here to help businesses, and we've learned out throughout this entire process that we have some unique categories, and it's hard to pigeonhole everybody exactly. But if we can afford it, I think we should do it.
Mr. Martin?
I'm not on the committee. I just
Yet.
want to offer an opinion or ask a question.
Okay.
How much, so we don't do anything. How much money do we anticipate we have left in the hopper?
Well, assuming that these last two programs are fully subscribed, the next item on our agenda is discussion about how do we reallocate the remaining funds that we know are available. That's going to be about, well, Mr. Onzik sent out a outline. It's $1,459,000. And I think the discussion that was held previously, although there is a request from staff to use some of that for internal county uses, but I think the spirit of the committee discussions to date has been that as the application process in phase 2 goes forward, and to the extent we got oversubscribed on the business grant side, and as Mr. Berger indicated, he's at 4.8 million, even if you round down because of expenses that don't qualify, let's say that's 4.2 million. He's got a number of in the over 100 additional applications that are open, assuming that those come in, will certainly max out at the 5 million. And I think at least the discussions I've had with committee members has been, number one, we want to make sure we don't return any money, but to supplement that program to cover the additional requests. So that's one option, but that's a determination this committee.
Well, and that's kind of where I was getting at. If we have programs in place that are going to at least, are going to be maxed out. My concern, and this is just a comment, and then I will sit back, is I've heard at the table here about 4 different definitions of what an amusement venue is, and it just, to me, coming up with a definition that is generic enough that it can go onto a form and a staff member can look at it and check yes or no. I think it's a much larger task than we're talking about here, and I don't know.
Well,
I don't know that we can just say let's draft it and do it. I'm not sure that we even agree as we sit around the table what it is we're doing.
I think and Mr. Fraz pointed this issue out in his comment about smaller venues get less money. I mean, when we've done, I've chaired the Riverboat Committee for a long time, and every year we get grant requests in that exceed the available funds, and we go through a process as a committee of allocating those funds pretty much consistent with what Mr. Fraz has suggested. Once the application is vetted and the requests are all legitimate, then we have to decide how we're going to prioritize that. And that would be an appropriate way to handle the concern that Mr. Fraz recommended, but we're talking about 3 weeks to get that done practically. And so the committee is going to have to be, if you want to create a hybrid situation, Mr. Berger may disconnect himself right now, but that's up to this committee, but that's what you would have to do to effectively accomplish what Drew has suggested.
Well,
and that is, right.
This is Scott Berger. May I comment?
Sure.
I just want to clarify for the committee, the resolution passed by the county board, in effect, passes the baton of implementing these programs to my office. So much so that we are literally expecting to award funds on a first come, first qualified, first served basis. We're respecting the caps you've put in place in the different categories. If the first applicant in line asks for and has eligible expenses up to that amount, they will get an award in that amount. Same will be true of applicant number 2, 3, 4, and on down the line. The intention here is to be able to make these awards and provide the assistance to the entities without convening an evaluation committee, evaluating the projects for which ones you prefer or don't prefer. It's more of a first come, first serve approach because time is of the essence. I just want to clarify that.
Ms. Thomas, you were next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's, we should definitely try to cast the net as broadly as we can, even as time quickly winds down here. But I want to make sure that we're reaching as many people as we can. And if there's a way to, we heard from, I think it was the chief judge's office, or, someone from the judiciary who spoke to us about rent assistance. If there are programs that Elgin is running, Aurora's running, already in existence, they could just, if we could have them apply for just more assistance for the programs they're already running for rent assistance. I think that would be more helpful. It would be helpful to more people. And given the surge in numbers, I think we really just need to, if we can address basic needs, which is kind of where we started with this work, helping the basic needs. I think that would be the best way to expend the remaining funds.
I would say, and Mr. Tepe alluded to that in his comments before, or early on in our meeting, that to me would have been something I would have supported had we set that out as a program in the beginning. But the challenge is the time frame we have left to set up a program for rent assistance, whether it's, to allocate it among the county as a whole, and that would create a whole new program that, as a practical matter, isn't going to be able to get done between now and the time frame it would have to be concluded.
Is there, and I'm sorry, I don't know, but do any of the board members know from Elgin, or Matt, I think is in the room, or Mr. Showman for Aurora, are there already programs in place in Elgin and Aurora that they could simply just submit another application, basically kind of amendment to the original applications? I mean, do we have to outline specifically for that if the cities are coming back to us?
Are we going to do that across the whole county? Or just in Aurora and Elgin?
No. If you have a program that's already up and going, then apply.
Right. Mr.
For what it's worth,
Sanchez, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bringing it back to what originated this conversation, trying to see if we can carve out space for Santa's Village and any entity like it. We're looking for a definition, and just searching online for kind of a legal definition of like an amusement park. I find something that means a tract or area used principally as a permanent location for amusement devices or structures. So this distinguishes a place that has actual rides as opposed to some place that doesn't. And I know the fairgrounds was mentioned, but that's a place that is temporary. It's a temporary location for amusement devices or structures. So in seeking a definition for the Santa's Village issue, something like that is what I would think would be helpful. And I don't know if Mr. Berger would concur with that definition.
Scott?
I think that definition would be very, very specific. That would mean, so what that would mean would be that of the different entities that I've heard you talk about today, my office would be giving a no answer to the Kuiper's Farm, to, Funway, to the fairgrounds, to the putt-putt greens that are sprinkled about the county, all of which, I would generally consider are recreational / amusement type locations. I haven't heard the committee necessarily determine that any of those entities are entities you don't want to give funding to. So I would challenge the committee to deliberate on that and give us a clear directive. And I would also go further to say that we would prefer this be approved by the full board on Tuesday to, in essence, modify Resolution 20-443. That's my feedback and comment for you.
Mr. Surgis?
So I'm understanding this a bit because I'm getting just a bit confused. We allocated $100,000 for that cultural institution portion,
We
correct?
allocated $1 million.
$1 million. And so far, I've only heard 5 or 6 from the Paramount to the Hemmons that would go there. So are we suggesting that that tier is out of money, or that tier in fact has money?
We won't know until the application portal's open. And there are many more entities that will qualify that haven't been discussed here at the meeting. The largest venues have been discussed, but there are other venues that would qualify as well under that performing arts.
Okay, I've yet to see that performing arts definition in there.
It was in the resolution, I think, that we approved, but originally to set up the program. All right, well, what's the will of the committee on this issue? Do we need
We
to-
have a primary and a second on the floor. Did we vote?
We don't have a specific definition that's precise enough for a motion, so
I would make a motion that we amend the original resolution to include events or
Amusement.
facilities of this amusement park type, maybe using some of the definition that Mr. Sanchez brought up. And I think that we should specify that they offer both indoor and outdoor activities and operate on a site 2 acres or more in size.
is there a
I'm sorry,
second?
did I understand they must provide both indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities?
Yes.
Be on
Okay.
a permanent site then.
Yeah, permanent site with both indoor and outdoor activities.
And 2+ acres?
And have at least a 2 acres site
I'll
facility.
second it.
Mr. Fraz moves, Mr. Kenyon seconds. Further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fraz,
Yes.
Thomas, Sanchez? Ms.
Sanchez,
Thomas?
yes.
Ms. Thomas,
No.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Surges?
Sturgis, yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries, and just for purposes of clarification, that language is proposed to be added to Resolution 20-443. All right, Mr. Berger, what does that do in terms of the application period for that specific grant group? Mr. Berger?
I show them as being muted.
Sorry, I muted my phone. Sorry about
Okay.
that. With this directive, I'm going to consult staff on whether we need to decouple the Museum Historical Society piece and get that out the door now, and then maybe, with a resolution pending board approval on Tuesday, redefine this venue category and launch that later. Get that launched as a separate application cycle. By the way, I didn't hear any differentiation regarding for-profit, nonprofit, ownership structure issues. So, park districts, for example, offer, indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities. I'm thinking Potawatomi Park in the community I live in has both indoor and outdoor recreational amenities, but I'm assuming that you're not including those types of entities in your request.
This is Drew Fry speaking. Yeah, I would not include governmental agencies. We had categories for park districts and those sort of things. So and I would not differentiate profit for not for profit and profit. So just not governmental entities.
So
Although,
Thank you.
I got to be careful with that because Hemmons is a governmental entity. Scott, what are you thinking? I just don't think that we need to include park districts because they had their own
Taxing body.
category.
They have their own taxing body.
Yeah.
All right, so, again, this is going to require some draftsmanship. I would say, Scott, my recommendation would be decouple these. We don't want this to get bogged down. Let's get if we can get the history centers out, let's get that out. this can be debated at the board meeting. We can have a resolution drafted that attempts to include all these requests, and then the board can debate that on the board floor with a final recommendation that they'll approve. And then you can launch the program.
Will do.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, then the final item for today is the issue of the allocation of the additional funds that are available. I think everyone on the committee received an email from Mr. Onzik this afternoon identifying the available funds that are unallocated. There was roughly $240,000 that was left in our contingency fund, some other smaller amounts that came back from other programs, and then the largest amount came back from the county clerk's office. We had originally allocated a significant amount of money to the county clerk to assist in dealing with COVID-related expenses for elections, and it appears that the county clerk's office already has received funding from other sources to cover those costs. So as a result of that, there's $1,459,000 remaining that should be reallocated to other programs. In terms of the programs that I know that are already available and vetted, there are some options that this board has. One is to do as I had suggested previously and tack these funds on to the business grant program. And as the applications come in, to see if that would absorb the entire amount. Another option is to use some of the funds to reallocate to the fire protection districts. You may recall we originally funded them to a certain percentage, not 100%. And those are already approved and vetted. So that's kind of a safety valve. If we needed somewhere to put the funds, you could use them there. And, you know, I guess a third option, and this is something I suppose we should discuss. There was a request that I had received from the state's attorney's office, public defender's office, circuit clerk's office, and judiciary for a $250,000 allocation to apply towards IT expenses related to telework, computer network, peripheral equipment for people working remotely. And so I suppose what we should do is digress for a second. That's a recommendation that's come to us, or a request that's come to us. I'd like to ask Roger to address the committee on that request and get his input.
Good afternoon. The request came to us from primarily the state's attorney's office and the courts related to their orders to have court held remotely. And there are a number of attorneys and staff in the offices that do work remotely, probably just over half of them. There are about 100 other staff members that they were looking to give the same type of ability to have that remote telework functionality, which means we have to buy the devices and equipment for them to use in the field or at home. So this represents the laptops, the network equipment, the peripherals, the things that we need licensing to move that additional 100 people remote. Right now, I believe they're handling it by having people come in, maybe doing their social distancing and separating, and then trying to rotate people in and out of spaces. So this was strictly a request from those offices to see if we could buy the additional equipment that they were looking for the remote access. So,
is this something that could be implemented and funded by the end of the year?
The equipment, we think we could get it in about 2 weeks as far as ordering the equipment and then start implementing it. They want to try and have that available to them. They see I think the orders for remote court go through January to February or March. But right now we would implement it and have it up and running by the end of the calendar year. So before December 30th would be our goal.
Are you looking for a motion for this?
Well, if we were going to act on this, the appropriate action would be for this committee to recommend passing a resolution, which is in the packet here, to allocate 250 from the leftover funds to coordinate that program.
So moved.
Mr. Surgis moves. Is there a second? Mr. Fraz seconds. Discussion.
I think this is a good move, and for a reason that maybe some of you might not know about, but one of the few benefits of the COVID program is with our court system. We've talked about expanding the courthouse over the years, and through this process of dealing with COVID, we're learning that to do some of this remote work. So I would look at some of this money almost as a pilot program to expand on that learning curve that we're on. And it may help us in the future not have to build as big of an addition as we want to. So I support it for that reason. So I would support this, and then I would also support sweeping the balance of the funds to the small business program.
Roger, if we fund this program and we buy all this equipment and a vaccine is approved and everyone's back to work, what happens to all the equipment we just bought?
So the laptop equipment that we use usually has a life of 3 to 5 years. The offices would have those devices to use for remote court telework still. And I think that we're looking at long-term, months at least. The eventual use of the equipment would be if they wanted to continue telework or continue a work at home program, they would have the equipment. I think the biggest challenge would be as you go down the road 3 to 5 years, maintaining that type of an asset, an installation base in 5 years when you have to fund it and you don't have CARES Act funds. That would be the big challenge.
All right, Ms. Thomas, you have a comment?
I'm just, and my apologies if I haven't seen the email. Are there any other requests from the health department? I would just like to know.
None at this time.
Okay, all right.
John, in terms of Angela's request or question in the health department, in the past week, all the press has just inundated us with information about the shots coming that need to be refrigerated in a super chiller cooler. Is that something that we would need to have coolers and storage? And do we have them? Are we anticipating needing them?
We funded a generator that would ensure that they would always be cool.
But I mean, do we have the facility to do that given what
Let me ask Roger to
So
answer.
they have refrigerators and freezers at the health department now, and they're installing additional refrigerators and freezers at the health department. And there's a location at the sheriff's complex that they're putting a backup set of refrigerators and freezers. Those are scheduled for installation in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and a second to allocate 250,000 to the request that's set forth here. Is there any further discussion? Clerk, please.
I have a
Mr.
question.
Hanson.
I have one more question.
Mr. Hanson has the floor. Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. I don't want it to get glossed over, but returning 800,000 of the 1.7 million, that should not, we need to thank that department and that group for finding the resources to make sure that they could have a safe election. It would have been very easy to say they received funding through the CARES Act and kind of let it go at that, but to chase down available grants from the state so we can repurpose the money is pretty noteworthy. And I thank Jack and his staff over there for getting this information, this money back to us so we can get it out to the community. With that said, I support some of the sentiments that have been articulated here, or been talked about in the boardroom, that the leftovers, if you will, that we're looking at, even beyond the 250 for IT, which I support, that's still $1.2-ish million. There may be additional funds from round one in the business grant program that are not approved. I would like to see the lion's share, if not the entirety of our balance, go towards the current round two business program, which is up and running right now. Basically, that valve could be left on to allow more applicants to come in, but I'm in support of any of the leftovers going towards small business round two.
All right, the motion on the floor is for the $250,000 allocation to the county request. Ms. Thomas.
No, I just wanted to confirm that if approved, that leaves another 800,000 or so. Is that correct?
Now, if that was approved, that would leave 1.2
1.2,
million.
okay.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fries,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Sturgis.
Sturgis, yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries. So as of now, we have two resolutions going to the board that would be on the county board agenda. The first dealt with the redefinition of permissible applicants under 20-443. And then the second is the resolution that's before us today regarding the $250,000 allocation to county expenses. All right, I believe Mr. Fraz intended on making a motion that we take the balance of the contingency funds and apply them to the business program. And I think I heard Mr. Hanson second that. Is that accurate based on your comments?
That's correct. So moved.
Second.
All right, and that would just, for purposes of rough math, that's $1,209,398. So if approved, Mr. Berger, that would augment the $5 million fund and provide resources to deal with the hundreds of plus applications that are in the queue right now under your continued Phase 2 business program. Discussion on this motion? Mr. Hanson?
Thank you. Just possibly an update from Fabiola. I received the spreadsheet and taken a peek at the bottom of it. It looks like there's still almost nearly $1 million that has to be approved. What's roughly the time frame on that? I know it's dependent upon.
Can we keep the
applicants.
discussion on this motion first? This is with respect to the Phase 2 business program. Okay, if we have a discussion on the Phase 1 business program, then we can deal with that after this motion.
Okay.
All right. Is the any further discussion on the motion to add funds to the Phase 2 business program as moved? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Fries,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Sturgis.
Sturgis, yes.
Thank
Right.
you.
And then for purposes of clarification for the county board meeting, that would be a resolution to modify that program to increase the funding by the dollar amount that's left over that we had indicated. All right, so, and before we get to Mr. Hanson's comment or questions on the Phase 1 program, Michelle, are there any other resolutions that the board needs to consider or the committee needs to consider to move on to the full board for consideration?
Fabiola has told me that there was a small business resolution included in your packet
All right,
to
and-
approve the, there's the form of agreement. To approve the amounts. You have that in your packet.
All right, there is all right, so we already have two. This would be to approve actual vetted, approved applications that will be supplemented between now and then.
That
Okay.
is correct.
All right, so, and this is somewhat related to Mr. Hanson's comment. Under the Phase 1 program, the process of reviewing and vetting those applications has moved forward. It continues to move forward. There are some apparently that are in a position to act on, and the hope was that at the meeting on December, I don't know what the date of the meeting is, next Tuesday.
8th.
The 8th, that those would be presented for approval. So I'll entertain a motion to place on the agenda a fourth item from this committee today that would include funding approval for those Phase 1 grants that have been completely vetted, approved, and we have the appropriate documentation for. And lists will be provided between now and then. Mr. Hanson moves, Mr. Kenyon seconds. And again, the desire is to get this money out the door as soon as possible. Any discussion on this item? Mr. Hanson, if you wanted to ask about the rest of the program, now would be appropriate time.
And I kind of thought it would go hand in hand with what we just approved in that for consideration for those sticking around on December the 8th, that if there happens to be true leftovers from round one, that the motion we just passed, adding the 1.2 could also include the leftovers from round one.
All right. Any other comments on this motion that's made?
If
Mr.
John,
Surges?
if there are, Scott and Fabiola, I've sent out a couple of emails specific to constituents who have asked, hey, it's been weeks, we haven't heard anything. Who am I best served asking that? Or if we've just approved this, is there transparency in terms of a listing of who's been approved so we don't need to bother you? Or what's the best way?
I sent a list to IT. I was wondering if they can bring it up.
All right, so one of the requests that I've made is that we have a list. I think what we can do is circulate that to the committee and to the entire board. So if they have specific questions, they can deal with them. I would say that if you have a question about a constituent application, you direct it to Michelle at the state's attorney's office, and she can provide you the feedback you need.
Perfect.
All right. This document is something that I saw probably at, as I was driving over here, but it was produced today to assist. And it'll give you the detail that has been requested multiple times for the meeting.
But I do want to bring up a point you had asked about Aliano's. Aliano's received over 44,000 in PPP funding. I need them to prove that they are not double dipping on that money before we can release any funds from this program. And there's the same instruction that has been given to them directly. That goes for everybody in this program. If we find additional funds that they've received, we need to have proof that they're not double dipping before we release any of our funds.
But just in response, that's clear as bell. What would that proof look like? What would I be telling them? Hey, knuckleheads, get this in.
I need to know what they paid. I need to show the same proofs that they had in a statement, proof of payment. The money that they spent from that, I need to have that proof plus whatever they paid in.
So if
with that money.
PPP was payroll, just whatever their
Payroll and they-
report is to say that's what that was
They
used
had
for.
payroll, they had about 75% in payroll and 25% in rent and utilities.
Okay,
So I need to have that proof before I can submit their,
got it. And they've been sent that.
they've been sent that.
Okay, super. A quick email blast saying, hey, this is where we're going. That helps enormously. Again, we're a great big county, but when we break it down to our districts, there's only so many restaurants to eat in, and you just, that's one of mine, and I don't want to ignore them yet. But even worse, I don't want to give them wrong information.
Only 3 applications in our program have come with that issue. Aliano's, Alburn Cleaners, and it's one of the Primrose schools that have come up with that issue where
Okay.
they received additional funding that's significantly larger than we have to give them.
Got it.
All right, any further discussion on the resolution, the motions that's on the floor? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Braz,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Sanchez, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Hanson,
Hanson, yes.
Surges.
Burgess, yes.
Thank you.
All right, as a final item of business this afternoon, I think it's appropriate. You can see that this process is becoming more intense as we get near the finish line here. I would recommend that this committee set a meeting next week, perhaps on Wednesday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, whatever the will of the committee is, and that you continue to schedule meetings at least on a weekly basis between now and the next couple of weeks. You may even need more than one a week, but I think it's appropriate to establish a date for the next meeting. Obviously, the vote at the county board, the CAC committee is going to have multiple resolutions. We have 4 coming from this committee today and several others, I believe 5 that were on that moved from executive committee. So after those are all if those all get approved, I think that gives clearer direction as to where we're going. But I would expect that this committee would want to set a date next week to follow up. Is there, with respect to the committee members that are here or the people in the room that are here that would have, is there an indication of a date, Mr. Fraz?
I would recommend Thursday at 3:00.
All right, so what I'll ask the clerk to do, and of course, this isn't my prerogative because I'll be leaving the board, but I think at least if we have that as a placeholder so that the agenda and the meeting notice can be published, that could be changed if the powers that be want to change it, but at least we'll have a process in place, or at least a date in place to move forward. Mr. Kenyon.
Maybe we have to clarify it with the entertainment segment. This would probably exclude private clubs. Outdoor entertainment, golf clubs, they have needs too. Are they going to put money in? So just asking, Sam, taken from your playbook. We want to keep it clear.
I love
All right, those are things that I won't be engaged in
So
discussing.
you don't golf
next
and
year.
neither do I, so we don't care.
But if I may be listening in just because of force of habit. All right, if there's no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hanson moves, Mr. Frost seconds.
Before we do,
Yes.
thank you very much for your leadership. You've been around these buildings and the preserve for a long time, and I have not been around for a very long time. Not everything that comes across this desk or the desks over the preserve are the month-to-month housekeeping items, so to speak, and to provide your perspective and your experience and your expertise in some of these things that got to a certain point. Maybe it's a recurring issue, maybe it's a longer term issue. I can't thank you enough for your help, and I see Drew and Mike over there too. And when there's needed to be a educational session for Matt and probably for other new board members too, you've always been very gracious with your time and your expertise. On the railroad tracks, you can't replace expertise or experience or clout. And there can always be clamoring for change or for new bodies or for term limits and things like that. But your energy and especially your experience and your clout will be missed. Whatever organizations you're a part of going forward, whether if they're appointed or elected, they're lucky to have you. And thanks for everything you've done for this county and for the preserve and for helping me out.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hanson. I do want to say that usually as a lame duck, when you go out, you tend to slow down. I have to say that the last several months have probably been as intense, short of forest preserve referendums and contentious Redgate Bridge meetings, which required a lot of time and effort. But this was, and the process goes on. And I want to thank our staff really, because I had somewhat of a heated discussion with the state's attorney's office today, not for the purpose of going off, but trying to keep the ship sailing in the right direction so we can get to our finish line. So it's been a pleasure serving. To be put in a leadership position is an honor. And, it's hard to deal with issues at the last second and balance the needs of the staff, what's realistic and what's practical, and then deal with the public in terms of their input and make sure that they think that we're being diligent. So my efforts in working with this committee have been trying to do what's best. It's not perfect, but I think we've done a good job of staying on track and working as a team. So thank you, everyone, that for your support and actually just showing up at the meetings. I mean, with COVID, we've had more meetings during the COVID period than before COVID because of the intensity of the issue. So I want to thank everyone. And with that, I'll ask the clerk to call for a voice vote, actually. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.